Have a good
Hello, everyone. How beautiful it is to greet you and realize that this call goes around the world. So I'm so happy to see you with us today. And I will be so delighted in a moment or two to be interviewing Morgan McKenna. She's here with us right now. And the other thing that I want to be sure and mention, so I'm going to do that before we do the invocation, and that is you have been
Marge.
receiving some emails this week about the summit that
Marge.
is being done by
Uh,
Humanities Team. It's a global oneness summit. It's a conference, global oneness. And it's really significant to me. This is going to be the second year that I've been on this global oneness worldwide conference or summit. And uh, it's one of those things that I call glimpses in time. Many years ago, I had a glimpse in time that this was going to happen, but I even tried to make it happen one time by going to a conference where I knew I would meet Steve Farrell and giving him my book personally. Nothing happened. Effortless effort is what the promise says, is when those things, synchronicities happen. We're on it for the second time this year. I'm going to be on it with Andrew Harvey and Jude Caravan, and that call is going to be a week from today. And so I invite you to sign up if you haven't already, and sign up to receive their calls. And then it actually starts this coming Saturday and then goes for most of next week. It's a wonderful, wonderful summit. So I invite you to be part of it, as I will be. And then let's go back to focusing on, the one other thing is uh, we will be sending out our replay after the summit is over, because I want to be able in the introduction to the replay to talk about the summit and the significance of it a little bit and how much it meant to me. So we'll take a brief pause here and simply say again, hello, world. I'm so delighted to have you with us. And I'm Marj Britt, founder of Called by Love and Living Loving Legacy. And it is such a delight to be with this group of people at this moment in time. We're going through cosmic moments now, very, very significant moments that have cosmic impact. And Morgan and I will be talking about that later in the call. So let me do the invocation. Come, Holy Spirit, O beloved one, come upon us, move in us, move through us, speak through us, speak as us. Reveal yourself in our hearts, in our souls, in our minds. Reveal yourself as you direct us to being invisible and sometimes unseen leaders in the cosmic shifts that are occurring now. Come up on us. And so it is. That invocation is something that I used for 19 years every Sunday at Unity of Tustin, and watched it grow from a small group of about 40 people into its glory days. And then after I resigned from there and founded Called by Love, we've been doing that invocation here, invoking the Holy Spirit to come upon us, to speak in us and through us and as us. So I invite you to do that in your own lives, in your own ways. And now I really want to welcome Morgan McKenna, my wonderful newfound friend. Actually, I didn't meet Morgan until 2022 when my brother passed through the veils, and I was in Boulder living for a short period of time with Ross and Mary and doing all of his arrangements, end of life arrangements, stepping into new roles as administrator of his estate, preparing his memorial service. All of a sudden, at the last moment, we were without a pianist. And Mary said, I know someone. And it was Morgan. So that was the way I first met her, as a gifted pianist. Be aware that the way you first meet someone may not represent their whole self. And you're going to see that in my dialogue, in the conversation that Morgan and I share today. So we're going to look at the 4 acts. Actually, she's only toward the end of her 3rd act, the last 5 years of her 3rd act. So I'll ask her if she has glimpses, like I just mentioned to you, a glimpse that I had of being on humanities team. And that was probably 10 years ago. It didn't happen in my timing. It happened in Spirit's timing. And that's the way your life will unfold also. Moments in time are extremely important. The intersections in time where you meet people are extremely important. And the heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connections, not necessarily the connections of the logical mind, because the logical mind ultimately becomes a servant of the heart and a servant of the cosmic mind, a servant of divine mind. And Morgan, let's take a look at that first act of your life. And the year you were born was 1954.
Yep.
1954. You actually are just 5 years older than my son would have been had he lived past his 45th birthday. But he chose to go through the veils, much to my surprise, before me. I always thought it would be the other way around. So surprises happen. Expectations are not always fulfilled if they're coming from the human mind. And tell us where you were born. You and I share this birthplace, but I'm sure we share some different influences, although a lot of the same I've found out. You're somewhat of a mirror for me in so many ways in my life.
Thank you, Marj, very much. It's just fantastic to be on this call. And I want to thank you for the way that you begin every call. And that is to invite the divine to be with us and move through us. And that verticality is so needed. I need it more and more every day. When I think that I know what I should be doing, what my life should look like, invitation to surrender to the presence of the divine is just so important. So thank you. And for your ministry, how it's changed and morphed from your beautiful work in the Unitarian Church now to a
Unity
larger
Church.
work. Unity Church to the larger work of drawing people upward, drawing people to the one. So thank you.
Thank you.
I was
And
born in Denver. You had asked that question, right? I was born in Denver, and my parents had come here in 1946, right after World War II, married in 48, and then they moved from downtown Denver to the south suburbs So I grew up in Colorado, but I've lived in other places. I've lived in Chicago and Toronto and Madison, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, also Northfield, Minnesota for college, St. Louis, Missouri, and Orange County, California.
Wow. I didn't realize we had that in common.
Yeah, I lived 3 miles from Tustin, and I didn't
Amazing.
know about the Unity Church there. Unfortunately, that would have been great for me. I was going through a challenging time when I was there, so it would have been great. But
What year was that?
from 2010 to 2012.
I was there.
Oh, so but we met precious time, and hard time losing your brother and yet celebrating his life together. And I was honored to be a part of that. So thank you.
You know, this you just talked about an example of something that I call near misses. And I've seen that a couple of times in my life where someone that I knew that would be significant and had been significant in my life, and I lived within miles of each other, not knowing it in
Yes.
the time in between. So it's really fascinating how souls seem to find their way, and often the universe arranges it and we don't get it. And
Yes.
until we do.
Yes, that's right. Well, it was meant to be. Thank you. And thank you for having me here. And thank you to all of you who are spending time this morning. I know you have many other things to do, but spending time with us, and then to those of you who are going to be listening later. Thanks so much.
Your parents were immigrants.
Well, not directly. Yes, their parents were. So I'm kind of that American combination of German and Swedish and Cornwallian, if you want to call it that, in the UK. But their parents had emigrated here. My father was from Montana. He passed almost a year ago, and then my mother is still with us. She is from northwestern Kansas, and so.
What are the ways that you have noticed in your life that your parents imprinted you, the influences where you can see that without having been born to those parents, your life would not be the same?
Well, first, I think of music, and my mother, just a straight line through. Her father was given a violin the year when he was age 12. He was sent out from Council Bluffs, Iowa, to what is now St. Francis, Kansas. He came out with his brother, and they homesteaded at age 12 and 13, and he was given a fiddle. And so music has come through that family, the Anderson family. And my mother learned how to play the piano while she was accompanying him for the square dances in town. And then she excelled so much in music, became a singer, and eventually a soloist around the city of Denver. So music for sure. And she and my father made sure all four of us children had music lessons. So I'm a vocalist, pianist, sister who's a vocalist, sister who's a violinist, and my brother plays the pipe organ.
Oh, that's another thing we have in common is this musical imprint.
Yes.
And my playing the piano for my father started learning it at 5 years old.
Oh, I didn't
It,
know that.
it's amazing how
Wow.
parallel realities and
Mhm.
parallel lives somehow show up again. And did, did you feel like you had a happy childhood? Was it a difficult childhood?
I was both. And I think many of us on the call can say that. We have happy memories. We have the things that came through our parents that we really brought forward in terms of our gifts and experiences, the way we discovered the world. That was absolutely true of my childhood. My father brought this sense of exploration. He was in the Navy, didn't see action. He was one of the younger ones. He died at almost 100 last year. But his sense of adventure followed us and gave us all these wonderful experiences, traveling to all 50 states twice back and forth across Canada, and 4 times through Mexico by trailer, really. So we were used to traveling. I learned history and geography that way. And when I was 9, my parents built a home in the country because my father wanted us to grow up in nature, being surrounded by nature. So that was another part of just a legacy given. But as with so many of us, there are family of origin stories that, okay, we just carry with us, and we have those difficulties, and we had those certainly in our family. And I think of our childhoods as holding places. And this is one of the ways that I practice astrology, the chart being a holding place, like a womb, like a cradle, the zodiac being, that circle, that place we can find safety and the reflection of our true selves. And so when I practice astrology, I help people to get into contact and dialogue with the difficult parts of themselves, knowing that they are held securely in love by the cosmos. The British psychologist and psychotherapist Donald Winnicott helped us to understand that all children need an adequate or good enough holding place, and that consists of a couple things: the emotional and physical holding of the child, and also the space for the child to explore, a holding space where the child can separate from the parent to become herself or himself. And those are really important as for functioning, the emotional and psychological functioning and development of the growing child. Now, I think any of us on this call can look back at places where those were done well and at places that those really were not done well. And we carry both the dignities and quote unquote the disasters of each of where the holding space served us and where it didn't. And I can say that is the case for my childhood as well. But then when we look at our parents with compassion, we understand that most of them did not have adequate holding spaces for their own formation. So looking with compassion and helping to release those areas that really didn't serve us. That's a task that I find even my clients who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are still doing.
Well, I have a sort of an opposite kind of circumstance in that my childhood was filled with so much love that
Mm.
I grew up what I call love handicapped. I
Wow.
didn't learn how to fight. I didn't learn how to argue. I never ever felt any kind of emotional wounding until I got married.
Okay.
So it's fascinating to me. Did you have a religion in your family of origin?
Well, my father was a Methodist, but he surrendered that when or the year before my parents got married, he went to confirmation classes at the Lutheran church in downtown Denver, where my mom was in the choir and a soloist. So he was confirmed in the Lutheran church, and then we were all raised Lutheran. I kind of joke about my Lutheran church experience. First of all, aesthetically, it was phenomenal. I can remember being a very young child at the church in downtown Denver where my parents got married. And I have memories of the sunlight coming through that beautiful stained glass. And I was simply enamored, and the music. It was just phenomenal. Now, my favorite part of the Lutheran service where people confessed that they did bad things. And I just wish that they would have enumerated or gotten more specific. Um,
How
but
old
as I
were you when you got married?
I was 22, just 22, about a week. And I was married in that very church, St. Paul's Lutheran in Denver. So, but along the way, I think after my own confirmation, I, like many people, I started just exploring the world and I left that kind of orientation to the divine. The creeds didn't make sense to me. A lot of the theology didn't make sense. And that was, I think, part of my own shift. And I had really seen much of my sacred experience out in the natural world from a very young age. And so that exploration became more important in
I
later
love the way you
years.
described one of the ways you knew you were shifting. It didn't make sense to me any
No,
longer.
no, no.
And because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you later in the call, and we may come back and ask that again. How did you feel the shifts coming when you did? So you went to college, St. Olaf
Yes,
College.
St. Olaf College, yes, and majored in music, vocal and piano performance. And I also got a teaching degree for public schools, did my student teaching. But I just realized early on after I graduated that wasn't for me. And so, as per normal, I just went on my own way. And I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life.
Well, you wrote a book, and
Yep.
this was during the time you were married or after?
No, it was when I was married, and I started that book in my late 30s, and it was published around the time I turned 40. Unfortunately, my marriage did not last, and that's been a deep grief for me. But the book was a way for me to grow, to meet incredible people doing amazing things in the world of faith. And also, it helped me to raise my children and give them what they needed in terms of resources. So that was a phenomenal experience to write that book and I don't know, go on the road. I never thought that I would do that, but all of a sudden I was going places to speak and teach and later on to consult. And yeah, it was just a magnificent experience.
And one of the things that I found intriguing about your life is that you were speaking to ministers, talking with them about shifts and changes in churches and growing churches and new ways of uh, creating and co-creating. And I found that utterly fascinating because, of course, I spent my life as the last second career in my life as a minister, and have loved that and did a lot of work in what I call church growth and development. So and so um, the time of your being a solo mom started in what, how old were you when you became a solo mom?
Uh, Effectively in my early 40s. And um,
A
yes,
midlife shift.
yes, it was a midlife shift. And I have loved mothering. I still love it. I I loved going on adventures with my children. And it's one of the things after my marriage ended and I really had the sole parenting responsibility for these two children. I felt strongly that my job was to give them as many opportunities for discovering the world and becoming who they were meant to be as I could. That was number one. And of course, I was starting a new career before my speaking and teaching career. I had been a worship director at a couple of churches. But this was a career that would take me outside the home. By that time, my son was about to finish high school and go into college. My daughter and I then were alone together, but she did well with the help of my village of friends and parents. She did well during the times that I had to be away. So, but we went on some marvelous trips, and I'm grateful that we could do that.
So let's do a quick review. I realized I forgot to do that as we were going along. The first picture that was in the reminder email, I love to print these out because I love to be able to go back and look at them when I'm re-listening to calls, which I love doing also. And the first picture was the one of you in your childhood. And this is you and your brother,
Mhm.
obviously. And and is he still living?
Yes, he's a geologist in Alaska. Very incredibly smart guy. So I see him once every 3 months. He comes down to see my mother, and he and I, during the time that picture was taken, were taking piano from the same amazing piano teacher. It's hard for me to call her that. She was a life mentor. She died in 2016, but she continues to have so much influence. Artist, photographer, musician, started the Madison Boys Choir, Madison, Wisconsin. Her husband taught geology at the University of Wisconsin. I started taking lessons from her when I was 5. So I relate to you, Marj, again in another way. But so that she actually took that picture of us. I was probably 8 at that time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Mrs. Plank was my first piano teacher.
Mm.
And when I was a minister in the second half of my life, uh, a person came to speak at our ministry about all kinds of esoteric subjects. And we had lunch, and I mentioned I was from Boulder, and she said, "Oh, my grandmother was from Boulder." I
Oh,
really? Well, my first piano teacher was Mrs. Plank, and she said, "Oh my God, Mrs. Plank was my grandmother."
unbelievable. There you go. I
There
don't
it
know.
is. Intersections in time.
Yeah.
They show up in ways we could never have planned. So the second review picture is this one of you and your father and your mother. And I love that your father lived to be 100 years old. I've always said I'm going for 100 and then I'll decide how much more I want.
I love that. Well, yes, I miss him. He was 99 and a half. That picture was taken, oh, probably 6 years ago. So I was out on an outing with them, close to and foothills close to Denver. So
Uh-huh. And then the third picture that I forgot to hold up for Garth
I
is the one of your children. This is when they were little.
yep.
And then the one of them now, and they have amazing careers
Yeah,
now.
they are. Yes, Peter
Uh,
and Anna. Yes, respectively. And
Tell me about Peter. He's the oldest.
he owns a film company, a small one. He works on documentaries mainly. He is a film editor and a colorist. Every nanosecond of a film is color corrected and adjusted. So he does that and works for companies around the world on their films. And so he's had films at the Toronto Film Festival, Austin Film Festival. So that's his world. And he's married to one of my favorite people, Jenny, who is also an artist. She's a chef. She's just a phenomenal person. And then my daughter Anna, who is now clinical psychologist, actually an operational psychologist for NASA at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. So
What amazing impacts they are having on this world.
yeah.
And how I would love to have your son do a documentary about you.
Ah, well,
You can tell
yes,
him I said that.
he could put in all the embarrassing parts.
Well, of course, you wouldn't be embarrassed because you're trained not to be.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, he's very talented as well.
And then, as you went into this midlife shift, uh, well, the company you founded, first of all, I love the name that you gave it, Sacramentus. The root word, of course, is sacrament, and
Yes,
the seven sacraments. And so,
yes.
Sacramentus, tell us about Sacramentus and how you were doing evolutionary consulting and speaking and teaching.
Sacramentus is about holy things. And my desire starting it was to help pastors um, it, arrange their services so that people would actually have a spiritual experience. And instead of talking about God so much, instead of um, all the words we have about God, to focus on the connection. And Sacramentus was a website, sacramentus.com. No longer, I don't have that anymore, but it featured resources that they could use from music to art, photography, information about rituals that they could use in their services to help personalize worship, to make it to bring it down to the human level. And that's one of the things that is very important through everything that I've done is this intersection of what we call the spiritual. Of course, the spiritual is all as above, so below. But let's say the transcendent and the everyday, the mundane. And this experience of sacraments in the church are really about that. A sacrament is the connection between the unseen and the material world, the bread, the wine, the water.
Yeah.
And Sacramentus brought that to mainline churches who wanted to freshen up their services and to add to what they were already doing, but then also evangelical churches who had really left what we call liturgical roots a long time before and then wanted to celebrate the sacraments in different ways, tangible ways. So that were the those were the origins of Sacramentus. And then after maybe 3 or 4 years, I really expanded to talking to the pastors about the spirituality of people outside their doors and how a hermeneutic of curiosity an orientation of curiosity to the spiritual lives of those they might consider to be unspiritual or consider lost, um, how they might be able to open up in spiritual dialogue and conversation with people in their neighborhoods. I had an issue in with spirituality in the 80s that talked about those who didn't go to church as being lost. It didn't make sense to me. Again, that was a shift. And so to come back to churches, whatever the denomination, and help them to expand and enfold and to learn from the people around them uh, it that was a real passion for me.
one of the things that I loved about my work with Terry O'Fallon is it really focused on the vertical dimensions of ascending and descending, which Unity focuses on also.
Yes,
Spirit descending and the soul ascending. Uh,
yes,
and also, Terry O'Fallon talked about the horizontal dimension and where time and space exists and birth and death exist in
yes,
time. And
yes.
she said, you don't want a skinny balloon. A skinny balloon can't stand up on its
I've heard her.
own.
I've heard her say that. What a brilliant leader she is! Just brilliant. She's been a favorite of mine in the integral circles. Yes, one just at the top of my list.
Yeah.
I have been influenced a lot by the Buddhist practitioner and psychologist, clinical psychologist, John Wellwood. And I pulled out
Yes.
a few quotes of his as we're talking about the vertical dimensions. And I envision a tether always in my work with pastors, the tether between the transcendent and this earthly, the man, whatever we call it, manifest, this what we can see and feel and touch. John Wellwood was spent a lifetime bridging the world of spirituality to our everyday. And I I wanted to just you know, quote him a little bit because I
I
think it's
love
so
that.
important. He said, well, first of all, this comes from an interview done with Tammy Simon, and you can find it on Sounds True. I believe it's called The Buddha Becoming Human. Um, but here are a few things that he said about it. He said, I'm noted for developing the idea of spiritual bypassing. That is a synonym for premature transcendence. And he said this about bypassing it's trying to rise above the raw and messy side of our humanness before we have fully faced it and made peace with it. He said to try to move beyond our psychological and emotional issues by sidestepping them sets up a split between the awakened part of us and the human part of us, the Buddha and the human. And that leads to a one sided spirituality where one pole of life is elevated at the expense of its opposite. And here's what I thought was just brilliant. He said, it's absolute truth that is favored over relative truth, and the impersonal favored over the personal. Emptiness is given priority over form, and transcendence is valued higher than embodiment, and detachment is made more important than feeling. When I heard this interview, Marj, it was like a bolt of lightning struck. You talk about a shift. And I realized, yes, it was a shift, but it was also in that area that I've been working with pastors for so many years. This Venn diagram of what we call spiritual and maybe even the soulful. If soulful is that which that is embodied, and no separation. Astrologists again say, as above, so below. And there's a map that one of my teachers, evolutionary astrologer Mark Jones, talks about. He draws this out. And so I'm going to draw this with my fingers. The surface of the ocean, and there's a wave that comes up. And at the tip of the wave would be the moon energy, which is the individual ego. So there's the wave. Below the wave, for about 100 feet, as it gets gradually darker, is the energy of Pluto. And that is of the emotional, our interiors, our emotions. The ego is more what we want to face out toward others, what we want to show, the image we show others. The world, the psyche is often what we hide. As Robert Bly says, we put it in a black bag. And by the way, one of my favorite books Robert Bly wrote is oh gosh, I've forgotten the title. I'll have to come back to this. But he's so good at helping us to understand the parts of us that we disown. That's the unconsciousness That's the unconscious. And that's the 50 to 100 feet below the surface of the ocean. And then the very depths, the very depths, the world of the outer planet, Neptune, the all, where the individual ego and the human psyche blend and fuse into the all. Now, normally we flip it so that the all is up here. I love this diagram that Mark Jones presents of the all being the deepest part of ourselves. And it's so important. All of these are important. Without them all, without an ego, we couldn't function. Without our psyche, we would not be able to grow in this lifetime. We would not have the interior experience and the ability to become more conscious. And then without this divine element, we would not be connected to all that is. So, perhaps that's a map that might be meaningful to some of you, but I think those are some things that are so important as we move into this next shift that you're going to talk about as you speak about the fifth dimension. I want to make sure you get that in. Um, it's all important so that we bring these parts of ourselves with us, nothing left behind.
It's so fascinating that you brought up John Wellwood, because when I was the minister in Walnut Creek, I was going through a difficult time in trying to get over a relationship that I'd been in for 8 years with a practicing alcoholic, and I'd left it.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and I he lived in Marin County, and I called him and said, I'd
Wow.
like to do some sessions with you. And he said, of
Mm.
course. And so I did.
There
And
we are.
even realizing what a gift he was to the world. And, I think we can disown the higher levels as well as disowning the lower levels.
Absolutely.
And it's about including all of it.
Mhm.
And in moving back to Kansas City after having lived in California for so many years, 30 years there, and now coming back, I'd lived here for 20 years before, and now returning to the heartland where Unity's world headquarters are. I realize is that it's part of that experience, integrating all of the above and the below, the depth and the height, and the vastness of the big balloon.
Yes, I love that.
A full, robust balloon.
I
So,
just remembered that Bly book, by the way, The Little Book of the Human Shadow.
oh,
I
okay.
cannot recommend it, and you will laugh. Bly is a comedian. You will laugh. But it's also some really important central the like meat for human living. That this is real. So I really recommend it.
So in your shift into the second act of your life, you really began a focus on photography. And this
Mm.
picture of you is when that focus happened. And interestingly, the cover photo that we used for this call was you now. Picture that you've taken in your new style of camera photography, which you call the ICN. Is that the right initials? Um,
Yes, ICM. That is camera using the camera movement while you take the photo. So intentional camera movement. And I started that not knowing what it, I've not never seen anything like it. About 2010, I had gotten bored with my own work, and it's easy to do as an artist. And then I started taking photos, moving the camera in different ways. And yeah, it's not the only way that I photograph. I use it less now than I did for a while. But yeah, and I think the I really was about capturing energy more than image.
And it gave
Really
you
want
a
to.
more mystical feel, you said, a more
Yes, absolutely.
paint, P-A-I-N-T, painterly
Right. I
feeling.
wasn't born with a paintbrush in my hand. I got a camera.
And so this is a
Yeah.
picture of one of your pictures that was in a gallery,
Mhm.
uh, that has that painterly feel, that mystical feel to it. And they're in corporations, they're in hospitals, they're in senior living centers, all kinds of places, boutique hotels. And what a wonderful gift to the world to
Oh, thank you.
pioneer something like that.
Oh, thank you.
Still involved in pioneering, and amazing, amazing. And then that shift into nature that you experienced so profoundly, which goes all the way back to your childhood, but repeats itself, parallel
Mm.
universes in different ways. Uh, I love this picture of you and your granddaughter. Neither one of you are expecting or having a picture that you want to have your faces. It's something else that's more meaningful, and you're headed toward it down that pathway, and it's nature that you're headed toward. So, what a beautiful, beautiful thing.
And
And
nature has been a great teacher for me. And I thank my parents for making decisions to move out to the country. That's a luxury, for most people. If they want to do that, it's not easy to do. And so I'm very thankful for that and developed a relationship with the plants and animals very early. And when I needed to work through something, I always knew I could go out and walk on this canal trail that was close to our home. And it was either therapy via music or therapy via nature. And both have become even more important to me as time has gone on. They're actually spiritual practices for me, and I haven't really known that until I look back and see uh, what they have revealed to me. And I am not, I'm not a verbal person by just nature. And people, I'm an author and I speak, but I have to translate energy through music, through photography, through the feel of relationship into words. So I really have to have practices that don't use words in order to experience the divine, experience the shift even. Usually doesn't come through words, at least first for me.
one of the things that I learned profoundly at the University of Massachusetts when I was doing my doctoral work is experiential learning. That it is not through the intellect, it's not through the rational mind that we really learn. Most of what I learned through my rational mind, I don't even remember. It's
Yep.
gone.
Yep.
What I've learned that is totally imprinted as a way of being for me is I've learned experientially. And that program was 100%
What a
involved
program.
in experiential learning. Jean Houston told me it was the best in the world. And
Wow.
during that period of time, they
Okay.
took an old ed school, dumped it upside down, like you dump a basket upside down, got rid of all of the old constructs of the rational intellect, and shifted to do experiential learning. And
Mhm.
I loved it so much that I took twice the number of hours it was required, and everything integrated. It only integrates when it's experientially learned. And most people don't even understand experiential learning. It's the highest form of integration. So I had one other picture, and I couldn't find the large one, so have to get by with this one. This is the one of you and your three grandchildren, two grandsons, one granddaughter, on top of the Space Needle in Seattle.
Yes,
This is part of your adventures and travels with your grandchildren and your shift in this act of your life, the end of your third act and in going into your fourth act, toward um, uh, uh, being a grandmother. And
mhm.
that's quite a shift from being a consultant and teacher and speaker in places like um, uh, Claremont University in Southern California and Fuller Seminary, one of
Yes,
the prestigious seminaries in California, also Yale. uh,
it
into
is. It
into
isn't.
this shift that's become most important in your life now.
It
And
is very important. Yes.
when I was trying to get in touch with you about some questions I had, you weren't answering phone calls. Not for
No,
like 2 or 3 weeks.
no, that tends to happen when I'm with my daughter and grandchildren, and they are ages 5, 12, and 15 now. So I've been at this for a while, but until a few years ago, they lived closer to me, and I just went on all these cool adventures with them. It was just great to be with them in that way. And then they moved to Houston, so I go down there. This summer I was in Seattle, and then the coast, the wilderness, Olympic wilderness up in northwestern part of the United States. And yeah, they're just life encapsulated. Anybody, all of you, or not all of you, but some of you have the joy of having grandchildren. You know this, the excitement and reconnection with your own child inside of you that this brings. So, yeah, they're wonderful, and I'm biased.
Did you do any of your degree work in counseling or psychotherapy?
No, I wish that I had. I did work after, gosh, the speaking and teaching. Then I became a psychotherapist in the state of Colorado, and I did that in alternative ways through various certifications. So I'm not a psychologist, but my daughter made up for me. She has a PhD in psychology, so I call her and I ask her questions. So I'm not a psychologist, but I have worked as a psychotherapist. And that figures deeply into my work as an astrologer, because I look at the zodiac, the chart in psychological as well as spiritual ways. And yeah, it calls upon the experience that I've had and the ways of being present. Hopefully, I'm growing in that to my client, and I just have this vision of astrology that instead of being a place when you have a session where you're told about yourself, it is a time for you to reflect to someone else about yourself, and for that person, if they're an astrologer, to look in the chart and give you extra insight. But it's shared story. It's very collaborative. Um, and I have to say, especially around areas of woundedness, again, all belongs. There are ways to look at the chart and you can see places of potential woundedness. And when that comes up, the act of presence, being present with a person, can help shift the idea of woundedness being a deficit to woundedness being a breakthrough into generativity. How is the wound teaching you now? How is it resourcing you now? Um, and it doesn't mean to not feel the pain. It is, in fact, in feeling that pain. that the generativity comes through. It's an alchemy. And so psychotherapy helps ground me in a practice of deep presence and collaboration, not perfect at it, but it does ground me as to what is this session about? Because more than anything, I want a client to come away having been affirmed for their gifts, their passions, seeing the cosmic direction in their life, um, in a way that they haven't seen it, or in ways that confirm their journey and what it's been. For many people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, the question is, what has my life been about? How should I have changed it? Could I have changed it? All these questions, these existential questions. What is my purpose now? And those things are symbolically, archetypally spoken to in their chart in a way that gives room for individual expression. And I love the fact that astrology is a mysterious art. We may look at it as predictive, but I've yet to meet anyone who can truly predict accurately an event in someone's life. We live in a quantum world, but to be able to look at windows of opportunity where a different choice could be made. And I say to people, if you want to predict the future, change who you are now. And where might those change points be? And I can help them look at those. And that's just a different way of using astrology. There are many types, but that is a lot of the way I approach astrology, as being this dialogical, collaborative discovery during a session. And
So
I'm very,
bottom up
very gifted to
instead
be
of top
working with the
down,
clients I am. Yes.
which
Yeah.
is one of the shifts we're going through now. And
Yep.
so um, we're close to the end of the first hour, and then we go into the 30 minutes of shared dialogue. And so and before we go out of the end of the first hour, let's talk about the intersection into astrology, and especially as relates to the cosmos and what's happening now in the world or in this country or in our lives.
Yep.
This
Yep.
shift that
So
we're
and we have been since 2008. I would say the shift has gotten more intense. And when I talk about a shift, I talk about a shift forward out of models of domination, of suppression, of any kind of marginalization, to models that are more equal, um, and where there is more opportunity for people to become their authentic selves and not to suppress it within a system that needs for people to be locked into certain roles to function. So that shift has intensified when Pluto entered Capricorn in February of 2008. And it's still in Capricorn. The last couple of years, it's danced a couple of times into Aquarius and then danced back. We have these retrograde times, which when a Pluto appears to be going backward, it's not really. But that does have an energetic shift. And right now, Pluto has been hanging out at the 29th degree of Capricorn for quite a while. And the 29th degree is what's called the anaretic degree. It is an intensity and maturity of that degree, that is, it's at its most potent. And when we talk about Pluto, we're talking about deconstructing what has been, what needs to shift. And then Pluto in Capricorn is working with the planet Saturn Saturn rules Capricorn. And Saturn is about our government, our corporations, our educational systems, everything that we have built to do life. Even our road systems, is a more concrete example. But what we all are experiencing is that everything that I mentioned there and more, and religious systems, is breaking apart, has been breaking apart. And that's Pluto has plowed through that entire uh, sign of Capricorn since 2008. And at this anaretic degree, we are experiencing really a level of breakdown which we have not seen before. Um, on November 19th, Pluto moves into Aquarius and will stay there for the next 20 years.
November 9th.
19, this November 19. So it will stay there for the next 20 years and will not come back to this degree where it is previous to November 19 for 248 years. That is the length of time Pluto takes to orbit the sun. And so when we think about the last time that Pluto was in, at this point in Capricorn, we're talking about the American Revolution, French Revolution, all the major revolutions except for the Bolshevik, but the major societal revolutions in Europe. And Aquarius, when Pluto moved into Aquarius, then we saw the rise of the call for equality, for the freedom to be and to believe what one wanted to become and what the worldview that one wanted to have, and governments based on those values. So when we move into Aquarius now, does it mean that the work of deconstructing our systems will be done? Oh no, that's going to take a long time. But there will be this shift that an intensity of to equalize power, to equalize resources, for people to be able to decide what's happening to them across the world. The ability to uh, live in a way that is true to you. That is going to intensify. And for those people who have been making that shift out of what a lot of us would call the density of the last few decades, um, those people who have already moved into more authentic ways of being in the world, then it's like a light to or a match to gasoline. Those people will be called to be leaders. And if they aren't already leading, will be asking themselves more seriously, how can I give to this world? How can I give what I have learned, what I know, maybe my resources to help others break free from these dominating systems?
Beautiful. And I'm so grateful for this dialogue with you, this
Me too,
conversation
Marj. Thank you
covering
so much.
so many of the facets and the shifts and the coming glimpses and in the four acts of your life. And you are not even going into the fourth act of your life for another 5 years. You have a lot more to come.
Thank you, Marj.
And I want to take a pause as we shift into the dialogue and simply remind people that this entire conversation and the platform that hosts it, Called by Love, is supported by love donations. And so I do invite you to find the donation button on our website or on these pages and to make a donation to Called by Love. Without your help, these free calls, they the technology world calls them. What I love to call them is donation based call, love donations based calls could not exist. And what I know is that I existed and thrived at Unity of Tustin with a love donation consciousness and went into being scarce, things of scarcity, into thriving. So I know that's possible. And that is a shift we're going through in this platform and in the world. So please, I invite you to give. Give and it will be given unto you. That's scripture. Pressed down, heaped over, overflowing. See if I promise that there's only one time in scripture that this kind of test is offered. Put it to the test. See if I will not pour out upon you blessing upon blessing. That's based on the principle of tithing, and which I have done all of my life. So I invite you to consider a love donation or a tithe to this foundational structure of being able to do these kinds of calls. And as we go into our final remaining 25 minutes, I would invite other people on the call today to share. Most of all, what I love having you share is what I call, oh my God moments. I even discovered some today. Oh my God. We lived just within miles of each other and didn't even know each other. Oh my God. We both started piano lessons at 5 years old. Oh my God moments, parallel realities, moments in time, and the way we have integrated our own multiple realities into a vastness using multiple maps of consciousness. And so I invite you to think about that in your own life and come on and share what you discovered about yourself. And the other thing, if Morgan or I have used phrases that you don't understand, ask questions. Ask questions that you're simply curious about. Curiosity is a gateway into new realities. And so I invite you to raise your hand. And you can do that by going down to the raised hand button. If at the bottom of your screen, and it'll show you how to raise your hand so we can see it that way, or you can just wave, because that's another way you can get our attention. And so, Garth, do you want to give us any more instructions as we go into this last period of time together with about 20 minutes left?
No, you did fine.
All right.
You
So
want to start with
I
Ross,
love to
huh?
go into a gallery view now for myself, and I can see people who are on the call, and I can see Ross and Mary are both here, and longtime friends of Morgan. And the reason I met Morgan was Ross and Mary. And recently, I know you even was a pianist for one of the major events for Humanities Team. So another form of contribution. So, and who else would like to share any comments or questions or oh my God moments? Anyone? Two
Ross and Mary had their
participants
hands
have
up.
their hands raised. Ross.
Hi, Morgan. Marj.
Hey, hey.
Margot, well, this is a small call, so Marie, how are you doing? Hi, Ed. I'm watching the replays of the Kansas City Chiefs for you, Ed. So we have a little football talk next time we get together. I have a question. Really, for you, Morgan, when we're talking about, astrology and that it doesn't necessarily, predict precise events or something like that, but yet it points to stages or times in kind of the awakening of humanity. And what you were discussing or describing was this time of deconstruction, which is, we can already feel it coming, right? You can already feel the pre-tremors of the wave coming in, and seeing the signs of it. I've just noted so many people in my world, in the coaching world, in the world, just at the workout studio just this morning. There was a woman said, I just gave up my coaching practice to get ready for this. Okay.
Wow.
To get ready for this, to be prepared for the future human and all that. So you're a really wise woman, but and everyone on this call is. And I would just, how do we ride this? Do you have, this deconstruction wave? Because it's and in my life, the deconstruction has always and been a fundamentally necessary precursor to any kind of new emergent. Just fundamentally necessary. It's just part of the thing. And we resist it. We don't like it. We don't like that part of the roller coaster ride. We like the chuck, 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 chuck up to the top. But
Yeah.
give me your, again, I'm just interested in your wisdom on this, in living through this deconstruction era that is about to be upon us.
Well, first I'm going to go to the data, and what really strikes me is that the three outer planets, we call them the transpersonal planets, Pluto, well, starting with Uranus, then Neptune, then Pluto, are moving into a relationship with each other. We call them sextile and trines. So a sixth of the chart and then a third of the chart. They will be moving into a relationship of two sextiles between the three of them. And we have not had that in probably over 600 years. And this beneficial relationship between, let's start with Uranus, the bringer of innovation, the disruptive energies that we need to make shifts right now in technology, for however scared we are of AI and what is happening. Historically, the changes that Uranus has brought in how we communicate and how we do life have been so massive that, and yes, they brought both dignities and disasters, but we have Uranus pressing us forward in terms of innovation. We have Neptune calling us to surrender. And it's in its own sign, in the last degree of its own sign. By the way, Uranus is at the last degree of Taurus, almost like approaching the 27th degree. There's 30 degrees to every sign. Then Neptune is right now at like the 28th degree of Pisces of its own sign. And then Pluto at the 29th degree of Aquarius. Between 2025 and 26, all of them will move into a new sign, which is hugely significant. But what I really want to talk about is just the benevolent relationship, the symbiotic relationship between the three powerhouses of innovation, surrender, and deconstruction. How do we move through this? It is that alchemy of all of it. And I would say Neptune most importantly. Neptune drawing us to the all and asking us to surrender. Neptune has been in the sign of Pisces since 2012. Again, another period of intense surrender economically, in terms of our relationships with others. If there are problems that we feel that have gotten so big they're out of our hands, Neptune is telling us, yes, that is true. And surrendering our need to control everything in our lives. So that's number one. I would point to Neptune. But then including the reality of deconstruction, of letting ourselves, so we surrender to the deconstruction, that's Pluto, and then we surrender into what we need to do next as a species to function in ways that are beautiful, true, and good. Yes, does that mean keeping a watch for the better uses of technology and building guardrails? Yes, I think that's absolutely true. But we will have to innovate our way through many of our crises. Now, that's on a cultural level, but it also applies to us personally. So surrender would be, it's easy to say, but very, very difficult to do. What does that mean for each of us? The kinds of anxiety that we're carrying. For some of us, it's become almost unmanageable. How do we expand into faith, into our a more elevated spirituality that is lived, both elevated and grounded? How do we make that real in these times when our anxiety could overwhelm us, and any time we're anxious and stressed, we can lose our connection. So that gives some idea. It's hard, but that we will continue the deconstruction process, and that we need to continue to and innovate through our challenges is a given. Being able to surrender into a greater idea of what it means to be human, the better human. What is that? And even surrender to it when we don't really know. And I think that's what Marj, that's what you're about, Ross, all of you, Margot, Marie, Mary, all of you are really about helping us to become better humans. So anyway, I want to give it to other people to answer your question.
And Ross,
Ross.
Thank you so much, Morgan. That was a fantastic answer. We'll riff on this more over lunch sometime soon.
Yeah.
Sure,
Thank you, Ross.
It's so interesting. Thank you, Morgan. I just love you, the people.
Aww.
The thing is that's so cool is that we really all can do it differently. And for me, there is a mental construction. My thoughts are not simply thoughts. Thoughts have energy. And
Yes.
so when we can go to the mental plane and hold a construction or create a structure that's in alignment with the incredible astrology you're talking about, it appears more personal, but it can also be lived through our best self. But I don't want to dismiss the mental constructions as
No.
People say, oh, it's theoretical. It's just because it's theoretical or abstract doesn't mean it's not real.
No,
I'm
absolutely.
in alignment with a group that's working, like has taken the fire of life. And it seems like people have different things. Some people resonate with water. Some people resonate with fire. Some people with soul and air. I mean, those may be basic elements of who we are. And to find that, and then, because they're really different energies, maybe soul or higher of who we are, and
Yes.
to be in line with that, it's not separative to do your own individual work. It's
Yes.
contributing to the whole. So
I totally
there's
agree.
so much joy in that.
Yes.
One of the things that I came up with that kind of helped me was, or that I resonated with from being an Episcopal raised and seeing the one thing in the prayer book that I resonated with that's not in the Bible was service is perfect freedom. When you find your
Oh,
alignment, your service is perfect free. Don't mind serving because where you are called, you're free in that. It's freely chosen at a different level.
beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
thank you so much.
Beautiful, Margot. Beautiful. And you're absolutely right. It all belongs. There's no dichotomy. Yes. And beautiful correction to the abstract is real.
Yeah, and the thing,
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
yeah, just
Absolutely.
it's kind of, Marie, I'm staying with, we're staying together, and she's such a flower, flow and flow, and I'm like, nail it down, and those two energies work
And
really
we need you. We need that.
well. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
And Mary has her hand raised.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's so fun to see faces like Margot and of course Morgan and Marj. I so love these calls. I had a question about the cradle that you described in astrology that myself now paying more attention to the night sky and going out and seeing the constellations. I do that every early morning now because it's calling me. It's like these stars are so intelligent. And how would you describe like part of humans at this time of remembering in a bigger way where we came from? We're coming from cosmos and we're coming into form. And the exact moment we choose to come in, even if it's a delivery, I'm thinking through these new souls coming in as well, but each of us came in, chose our families, chose where to live on the earth. I believe that's a possibility that we had for sure a soul understanding of what we were doing in incarnate. And then how do you see humans getting more back to these rituals of knowing how the stars work, being within their embrace and following more rituals that bring us to that? Because I feel like we've lost it so much. And people think when they hear astrology, they think, oh, that doesn't mean anything because they've lost that connection. And for me, when I look out, I see Jupiter so bright. I see Sirius. I see Pleiades. I see Orion, excuse me. And I love seeing these stars and communicating with them and getting the embrace of that cradle, especially in deep parts of nature where you can get the huge expanse of the sky at night.
Yeah.
So
Yes. And we've lost that. And Mary, your work is so rich in this area and all the study, but more so your practice of connecting, to these stars. And Margot, I know you have spent so much time in a collaborative way connecting to individual stars and one in particular. Um, you know, I've heard, the universe talked about as a luminous web. And when you talk about a cradle, our solar system is just one, minuscule tiny part. And archetypally, it is so rich because we have had thousands of years. Some say, maybe the earliest astrological markings on caves would have been at 20 to 25,000 BC, which is, really incredible. But in the scope of the universe, how old the universe is, and maybe there are more universes, right? It's very small, but our archetypal connection to our solar system, because we weren't able to see beyond Saturn, is so rich. And I think we are our basic archetypes have come from that in every culture. However, um, it doesn't shouldn't overshadow the fact that we are embedded in this this incredible space, this sort of an infinite reality. I work with what we call fixed stars, because, you know, to ancient people, stars didn't move and planets did. So I don't work with them a lot, but I do place the royal stars, for instance, in the, you know, the gates of the directions in people's charts. And I'm using them more and more. And so I am recognizing a lot through you, Margot, and you, Mary, the importance of that work. I also work the asteroids, and but it's interesting. What would it be like as humans to not place ourselves at the center of the cosmos? That was the question that Copernicus was asking and answered, and couldn't even share before he died, because it was so radical that we don't have an Earth-centric universe. And I think the question about how far out are the influences challenges us to think cosmically. And there are astrologers out there doing beautiful work with stars and star energy, and I've started to follow them. But to your point, all of the energies are so important. I will say that in the solar system, the outer energies have, the further out the energy, the deeper and stronger the influence astrologically. So if that's true, then the stars and the galaxies beyond our galaxy have greater influence on our lives than do our personal planets. It's just that we know the personal planets and archetypes better and have worked with those. So there's a lot of room for growth there.
Mhm.
And as far as the cradle of stars, it's a new emphasis that I'm going to be making early next year. I'm branching off. I will have a website, cradleofstars.com. And really, it's about the beautiful web of holding, like that holding space I was talking about, that I believe that the cosmos way out, you know, beyond what we've ever discovered or possibly can discover, holds us. And, you know, we have had that concept in our Judeo-Christian understandings, but it has been in a more anthropomorphic, you know, version of a God who is a father, for instance. Well, most of us have incorporated that perhaps as an archetype that works, but gone beyond God as one thing. And so I think that we are in terms of the holding space and who holds us, we've been able to free up the who, to free up source from the smaller views that we had and the smaller rules. And yet the cosmos to me is that cradle, is that web that can affirm identity, can affirm the wounds, and then draw us through them and beyond them. And we can learn from the presence of the divine, which Mary, you so beautifully have explored in all, you know, the different realms. The presence of the divine, to me, an astrology session, if it is not contexted in that vastness, then people are still alone trying to defend their lives. And I think we should be able to move beyond defending our lives to being present to ourselves and to others with the bigness that we are.
Yes, thank you. Love it. So excited you're making that website and your new offerings.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the
I know
call.
it's a long
Everyone.
time coming. Yay.
Yeah.
We still have two more participants, and Ed has his hand up, maybe.
Morgan, you may have covered it, but could you share a little bit more about what your present book is about and what is the context of it?
The Cradle of Stars. The
Okay.
context is the shape of the zodiac being a circle, being like a holding place for a child, for a baby, for our essence, a holding place, and yet large enough to grow. So that's the nature of it.
Yeah, thank you.
And when do you expect that to come out, Morgan?
I'm not for a while, probably to late 2025, maybe 2026. I've just really started this project, so yeah, very excited about it.
Awesome. And Garth or Ross? We'll go a little bit over time so that we can get you both
I
in.
just want to put in a request. Marie, you're the only one on this call that I haven't heard from yet, and whom I don't really know, at least semi-intimately. We've, I've hung out with all these people for a long time, and we've been sharing a lot of things. So I would just love to hear from you. I'll just say one thing, Morgan, about when you were doing my chart. One of the things that was most valuable was affirmation that there's a day journey and a night journey. That's just very basic, understanding. And the day journey, for me is all about logic, reason, my persona, money in the world and everything like that. But it's the night journey that really is the really interesting thing, where all the deconstruction happens and we actually gather strength and get gifts, and gets down below reason and logic. And so
Oh,
I heard you might be a nailed down person, Marie. You and I have that in common. I love linearity and all that. But I just request to hear from you just briefly, if you could.
Margot's the nail down. I'm the flow.
Oh, you're the flow. Good.
Yes, but
No,
together we're learning new
if
ways of
Margot's the nail
being.
down, you got quite a bit of flow going on there.
I do
Yeah.
we need
exactly.
both.
Exactly.
Mary's always complaining of like this lawyer like sword that I've got. That it's terrible. I mean,
We need both.
We learn from each other. It's beautiful
Yes.
the way we're reflections of each other, right?
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good to
Mhm.
see you.
Thanks.
Marie.
Thanks, Morgan. You too. Thank you. Thank you. Mhm. And thank you, Rob. I don't want to interrupt anything, but so Marj, wonderful to be on the call. Thank you very much for hosting this. Morgan,
Yes.
brilliant. So much fun to hear more of your story. And I've got a little email already for you, because I just want to thank you very much
Yay.
for the way that
Oh,
you're
thank
able
you.
to tell stories and communicate complicated sort of things in a way that I think takes us, our mind, and the space that we've created together
Oh,
deeper
thank you so
and
much.
really intentional and really purposeful. So thank you so
Oh,
much for that. And
thank you.
as far as me, I'm one of those people that's just out there on that journey of life. Tried to control for a period of time, thought I was the one doing it. And of course, what many of you may have experienced yourselves, but after several crises, you realize you're the one getting in the way. Oh, oops. Okay. So there's some relief in that, and also some humility, I think,
Yes.
which is another theme I
Totally.
think I heard in some of what you were saying earlier, Morgan. But then reacclimating to, well, what does that mean? And how does that influence our perception of ourselves and each other and all of this magic and that's going on, that we're here to be present for, even though we're looking out these days and thinking, "Oh, okay." But I think it's thank you for letting me land that word. Might work for these times, although I think it could be also a precursor for some of where we may be going. But it means to me, sort of hold everything very lightly. Anyways, on this journey, and realizing, oh, okay, so I'm sort of getting it now, and then how do I be in service. And life has shown me,
Love that.
created invitations for me in places that, there's an insecurity and an awkwardness and step into it, but
Well,
I'm stepping in and
you
saying,
are.
in the learning together and in the creation of communication and relationships from people who I know will give me the mirror and the feedback in loving and compassionate ways that'll help me grow so that I can, be here to be present with all that I'm intended to be, although who
Wow.
knows exactly what that might be.
Oh, I love it.
Maybe Morgan can tell me some more about that, but I suppose I will. Yeah. But in terms of the sort of cosmic journey and letting go, I'll just say, recently I met Margot at a conference, and I was in a particular time in my life, and so here it is. She was wonderful and brilliant and warm and opened up her space, and I had no idea who she was, and she had no idea who I was. And
Wow.
the relationship, and I think the meaningfulness that has developed from there, and the ways that we have conversations and work things out on all the dimensions
Wow.
and back up and down and back up,
Up and down.
has been, such a wonderful experience. And through all that,
Oh.
I got to meet Morgan and, of course, Ross. Mary, I may see you on Friday. And so anyways, okay, thank you very much. I hope that was okay. Thanks for giving
Oh,
me
it's
that
beautiful.
space.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. And so much of what you just said, I think we're all in all these places that you just talked about, and reaching the end of ourselves. I want to also bring what you just talked about in terms of serving and Margot. Wow, that reminding us that serving is a way that we get out of these loops. And I'm putting that in my words, but it was so important, Margot, for you to remind us of that. And then Marie, for you to be talking about the way that you're moving into serving, and then the surrender to just, okay, I guess this is life happening now, and letting go of the controls. I think that both of those, that serving and letting go of control, are going to be so essential moving into this shift. And thank you again for living that and demonstrating that. And Marj, I see that with you as well. And what I know of your history, I have worked with many pastors. In hearing, Marj, your story and the way that you moved so intentionally into collaboration from the very beginning. This is a letting go of control and surrender that many leaders don't know how to do. And I've been around a lot of pastors and around myself, control oriented. So really learning about that in your history and the way that you have formed this new ministry. And we're also very, very thankful for Called by Love. You have done it collaboratively again, to serve. So I think examples to all of us to how to move forward, serving, collaborating, and letting go of control. Wow. Seems like we've got a little bit of a map here. So thank you, Marj, for this call, for inviting me, and for all of you who've been on.
And Garth, we'll let you conclude.
Oh boy, oh boy. I feel so connected with you all. It's wonderful. Starting with the fact that many, maybe even most of us were born in 1954. I also agree that service is the key to happiness, and that that's the focus of my life. But the aha moments came about experiential learning, and how I have learned almost everything that's really important to me by experience. And I inherited that. This came down from my grandparents, who took my 4 their 4 daughters, one of which was my mother, on a trip around the world when she was like 13. And for a year, they went to 20 different countries, mostly by ship, but also by train and horseback and every way imaginable. And so my mother then in turn passed that on to me well, in the interim, she graduated Claremont College with a degree in voice. So she was a soloist in a church all her life, and also a pianist, and tried to teach me piano, but that didn't work. But I learned other musical instruments in my life. Anyway, my father was a school psychologist, so he had summers off. So every year for a month, we would go traveling, usually around the United States, but often to other countries, Mexico, Europe, Hawaii, Japan. Anyway, and I learned a lot about life, a lot about the world, experientially from those travels.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. So the other part of it was my grandparents and the whole family here. There was 4 daughters and 10 grandchildren, and we all got together every holiday and really did our best to learn from each other. You know, what are you doing? Let's sit in a circle and everybody get to tell your story. And that was really remarkable.
Wow. Thank you, Garth.
So
Wow.
fabulous. What a perfect way to conclude. And just a final comment, Garth is now working with Humanities Team, and that's how I met Garth, through Mary. And he's part of the organizing of the conference that I'll be on a week from today. And you can sign up for it still. Go back and pull up Humanities Team emails, and I'm sure you'll find the place to sign up for that. So do it. And I want to tell you that next month, our spotlight guest for the conversation is Toni Baim. Her book is called Energy Dynamics, or she has multiple books, but Energy Dynamics, Energy Mastery, and it's about ancient mystery school wisdom, teachings, and initiations that are brought into union with quantum science. And she has been a longtime friend of mine and has traveled all over the country doing consulting and training with Unity ministers. So I'm looking forward to that call. The quality of these calls just keeps getting better and better and better. So thank you, thank you, thank you for everyone that's been here. And let me begin by end by also just sharing the first stanza of the promise from A Course in Miracles. Once we have accepted God's plan as the one function that we would fulfill, there will be nothing else the Holy Spirit will not arrange for us without our effort. It's called effortless effort. And what I found in my life is that I pedal as fast as I can on the back seat of a two-seat bicycle, keeping up with where the Holy Spirit takes me. So I invite you to join me in that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week.
Mhm.
It's been a wonderful, wonderful time together. We're going into higher octaves, and the higher octave of Venus is Margot.
Oh, I don't know that. That
Neptune
Morgan.
or Uranus, one or the other. They're both
Neptune.
higher octaves.
Morgan
Neptune.
knows that.
Yes,
you go.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we're on our way to higher octaves. Much
Yay.
love
Thank
to
you so much,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Real pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful
So
rest of your
much
day.
gratitude and love.